he started telling that he was going to die young. He said it would have something to do with the green car. He picked the cemetery where he wanted to be buried, and he picked the song Stairway to Heaven to be played at his funeral.
Kia ora, hello and welcome back. I'm Kirsty Salisbury. This is the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Today I'm chatting with a beautiful guest who has quite an interesting story. Her story is about the relationship with her brother, but what's interesting is that her brother died at quite an early age after he predicted his own death. So I'm really excited to see where today's conversation goes. I'm chatting with Kristina Amelong. Kristina has been on this journey. It was her loss then led her on a powerful journey of healing, of resilience, of spiritual discovery. She's the author of the book, What My Brother Knew. It's a beautiful looking book, I'll say that. It's very, very interesting. Kristina Amelong, welcome along to Let's Talk Near Death. It's so great to have you here with us today.
Thank you. It's super wonderful to be here. I'm so honored.
I am very, very curious. Your brother predicted his own death. How
Yes,
did
he
this all
did.
happen?
Well, so back in 1980, when he was 12 and I was 16 years old, he started telling me, my mother, some of his friends, a cousin, that he was going to die young. He didn't know when exactly, but he said it would have something to do with the green car. He said he'd be up above his body watching the paramedics try to bring him back to life, but they wouldn't be able to. He said it was fine. There's nothing we could do about it. It was going to happen. He said then he picked the cemetery where he wanted to be buried on Easter Day in 1981. And he picked the song Stairway to Heaven to be played at his funeral. And he was very relaxed about it, but he really wanted us to know. And as it would get closer and closer, he would do things like he was hit by the green car on May 27th of 1981. And on May 26th, 1981, the day before the accident, he went to the store, and my mother was constantly grounding him because she knew, and but what do you do, right? And it was an impossible situation, but he was grounded, and she sent him to the store to buy her a sprinkler. And he came home with a birthday present for her, a yellow rose bush, and her birthday's on July 3rd. And so can you imagine being a mother on May 26th, and your son brings you your birthday present 6 weeks early and says, just in case I'm not here on your birthday. And then the next day he is hit and killed by this green car. So yes, this happened.
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, when you first said it, I was thinking of the parents thinking, oh, how, I don't know how, if my daughter came to me and said, oh, I think I'm going to die and it's going to be very soon, I don't know how I'd cope with that. This is
Right?
this is big stuff, big stuff. So
Very big
how
stuff.
was that when he started talking about I'm going to die?
Well, I mean, for me as his sister, I just found it annoying and like impossible to comprehend. And and there's multiple passages in the book where he approaches me and tells me this, and I just, scurry him away, like shut up, like that. For my mother, though, and also in the book, there's multiple scenes like she's calling a friend and she's sobbing and she's saying, what am I going to do? And most people are like, what can you do? And but she tried to ground him and she tried to keep him home. But the day that he was killed, he was actually skipping school. He was supposed to be in school, and he was hit by the car before school was even out. So yeah, I think for the most part, I mean, my mother believed him to some extent, right? Because she
Mm.
did things like try to keep him in the house. But for the most part, it was something, and I've heard, because I've listened to a bunch of your podcasts, And one of the things I've heard a couple times is people saying, well, no one was even talking about near death experiences until the 80s. This
Mm.
happened, it started happening in 1980, and then he was killed in the end of May of 1981. So there was no conversation to even plug this into or to try to make sense of it. So yeah, it was a profound mystery, and still to this day, I think it is a mystery, right? Yet.
Yeah, yeah. My mind is an overdrive. I'm wondering, how did he know this? I mean, did everyone, your mother must have asked, what makes you think that? Why do you think you're going to die?
Well, that's a good question. And my mother would never, ever, ever, ever talk to me about this. I think her survivor's guilt, her guilt
Yeah.
for making, not stopping it, and just also her upbringing around how do you handle grief. Like, he's just been killed like 2 hours prior, and she's holding on to a piece of his clothing. And her mother walks in the door and says, drop that piece of clothing. You're going to need to just get over this right away. And so she didn't have the tools to deal with this. And so I don't know if she ever asked that question. I never heard her ask that question. But I researched this book a lot because, well, first of all, it was so painful and also traumatizing, in part because we didn't stop it, and in part because I saw his dead body when
Oh,
after he had passed. And so, and then, I needed to process it. I needed to make sense of it. And I, I had no one to do that with in the beginning. And so as the years went by and I was working on myself, it was one of the things that came up all the time in therapy and whatnot. And and so then I finally found, because when it happened, and I think this happens a lot, but obviously not always. Uh, his friends left, the family blew up, like
mm,
everything that was connected to him prior to that was over. And so I didn't have contact with his friends afterwards. And I've just gone to a Natalie Goldberg writing retreat, and I read out loud some of my contemplative writing that I did around Jay. And everyone's like, you got to write a book about that. And so I'm flying home from New Mexico to Wisconsin, and I'm like, oh my God, I gotta go back to college, and I gotta get a writing degree so I can write this book. And it turns out I sit next to an English professor on the plane. Um, isn't that great? So
yeah.
he's like, okay, let's make a list. Who knew Jay? I'm like, well, like at that moment, and this was just like 8 years ago, or seven, six, I don't even know. I was like, I don't know who knew my brother. But so from that list and from him telling me to write this list, I started writing down, oh, well, he knew Jay, and she knew Jay. So I started trying to find people, and I've talked to him. So my experience for 40 years was that he had a dream, and he saw it in a dream. But even before I started interviewing old friends, I had called up the Harvard Divinity School that has this big dream database, and there isn't a story of a child seeing their future like this in record. I
Mm,
haven't found that. Um, and so as I was interviewing people, I found out he had been doing LSD,
okay.
and that he had told a couple friends that he had seen his death while he was doing acid. So I don't know. In the book, I leave that as a mystery, but I also, because I don't know for sure, right?
Mm,
But then also, like there's a consciousness conference here in Wisconsin that I've gone to a few times, and I've talked to people that go to that. And for instance, this one guy that I met there, he's like, oh yeah, we were all doing LSD in the 80s.
mm,
Because Madison is a university town, and there was a lot of um, protests going on, a lot of activity on the campuses, and I guess acid was just very common. And so like if you had siblings and they had older brothers or sisters, supposedly you could get access. And there was a lot of drugs and alcohol in my neighborhood. It was a working class, poor neighborhood. And so I was very aware of the alcohol, the marijuana, that kind of stuff. But maybe he discovered it on LSD. What do you think?
Oh, I don't know. It's very possible. I've heard of all sorts of people having experiences when they are in some sort of induced state. And yeah, it sort of takes me because that's quite young, because you said he was 13 at the time.
Right, like how does a young boy do
Yeah.
LSD and go to school and not see like because he wasn't a troubled kid. Like if you the process of interviewing all these people, I found out he was like one of the most popular kids in the school. He had a
Mm,
newspaper route. He played hockey. He played softball. So here's a normal, healthy, happy kid who had all this inner world going on
mm.
that he held seemingly beautifully, where it wasn't like causing a lot of chaos in our lives. So,
Yeah, yeah, I understand what you're saying with that. I find it so fascinating the detail that he had. It was a green car. Buying the birthday gift, I mean, oh, that gives me shivers thinking about that. It's like he knew that he wasn't going to be there, so he'll buy the gift so that she doesn't miss out. Talking about, you mentioned he said, I'll be above my body looking down and I'll see the paramedics working, but they won't be able to save me.
right,
I think back to the 80s, the early 80s. There wasn't a lot of, like, we didn't have the internet back then. There wasn't a lot of talk, like you say. We just started talking about these topics in the 80s, basically, when it became really aware of near-death experiences, of spiritual experiences, out of body, all of these beautiful things. So for him to have the clarity of a green car, I'm above my body, they can't save me,
right.
blows
And
my
to
mind. How, like,
have
that's,
that,
how do you make that up as a 12-year-old?
yeah, no, well, he
You
couldn't
kind of can't.
because then it happened.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I don't know. I mean, if you're a listener out there and you've had an experience where you feel like you were prompted or you knew something was going to happen, let me know about it. If you knew about a death coming up, people do have pre-death premonitions, where they see somebody's going to die. They just know it. My story for myself is that when I was young, because I had my near-death experience when I was 12, actually, so that's quite interesting. I always knew something was going to happen. I just knew it, but I didn't know what. And I thought I was going to be really, really sick. I thought something was going to happen, but I couldn't tell you when. I couldn't tell you what. I just had this inkling. And then when I did have my illness, it was all very sudden, which when I say I thought I was going to be unwell, it was I thought I was going to have cancer, or at the time there was a lot of chat around AIDS and things like that. And I didn't understand anything. And I thought maybe that's what will happen to me. Just had an inkling. So I know some of our listeners as well have inklings about things. His must have been so incredibly strong, to
Yeah.
talk about it and to really go to that detail. So yeah,
Yeah,
my
the
mind's a bit
detail and then
blown.
be at peace with it, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's
Like
like
it
he
makes
knew it
sense
was
that
okay.
yeah, well, and since I've researched near-death experiences like yours, etc., and there is a different person in the book whose near-death experience is written about, a very close person to me, and that helped me a lot. And so it makes sense to me when you have a near-death experience and you experience what it's like that you would be at peace because of
Yeah.
that about dying, right? But to not die and still be at peace and to be 12 and 13. I'm still puzzling about that.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. We often talk about how we come here for lessons or for other people to have a lesson through our existence or through the way that we live our life. Wonder if he felt like a sense of purpose. I
I
don't know.
think
I'd love to go back and ask him a million questions, but
I know, right? Wouldn't that
yeah,
be so amazing?
yeah,
Can we please go back to 1980?
yeah, just ask him what he thinks.
I know that would be so incredible. Like, yeah, I would love that. That is one of like of all the mysteries, that is one of the biggest mysteries to me is just how okay he was. But it's interesting because I haven't up to this moment applied the word purpose to him in his life. But
Mm,
actually, when I'm thinking about like what some of his friends told me about who he was as a person, he did live with a very deep sense of purpose, and it was very much about kindness and friendship and relationship and just love. He was an amazing human being. He really was.
mm. I can't help, Christina, but think about the driver of the green car. How it would be very, very hard to be placing fault or, you'd with him predicting it so clearly, it's almost like, okay, well, I'm really sorry this happened, but we don't blame you. There's no hard feelings. I don't know. Did you ever have any contact with the driver of the green car? Did your family ever?
So I decided to call the driver, and it was terrifying.
Wow.
Um, because that's one of the ways I talked to people was I called them up. I also met people in person. Um, so I called him, and he answered right away. And I said, um, hello, just so you know, this might be a weird call and you can hang up on me anytime. My name is Kristina Amelong. And I said, do you know who I am? And he said, and this is, 38 years later.
Mm.
And he said, his exact words were, well, no, first he said, well, I'm a funny kind of guy. So he responded with humor and kindness. And I said, that's when I said my name. And he said, yes, I know who you are, an eye for an eye. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, my daughter died of a pharmaceutical drug overdose. And so right there, I was very confused. I mean, I just felt like he was saying, I took a child and reality, God took a child from me. And but since I've read the police report and it was redacted that he had had his pharmaceutical medication changed the day before. And so I do think he felt like it was the pharmaceutical medication that because what happened is he was driving home from lunch and he blacked out and he went to pull over because he felt himself blacking out and he blacked out before he could pull over. And so literally he was out for a minute and that's when the car hit Jay and killed him. Um, and so, but Kurt, the person who saw it, who was my brother's friend, he also went up to the driver whose car hit a tree. That's how the car stopped. And the driver was very, seemingly out of it and kind of drugged up.
Mm.
And Kurt thought that he was quite drunk or something. Obviously, I mean, if you just see your friend brutally run over, you're gonna think something. Plus, he was passed out. So the driver, an eye for an eye, he very much blamed himself. And I tried to communicate that to him, just what you were saying, like, well, my brother needed a green car. So please, can I please give you the forgiveness that I hope will help heal you, or at least help you have a broader world view of what's going on here, that you are not just, a terrible person whose daughter deserves to die. But he couldn't receive any of that. And actually the whole time he was thinking that I was the mother. He couldn't, it
Mm.
was very difficult for him. And so, but I was very honored to be in his presence and to talk to him and try to send him love and forgiveness. But then I went and told my mom. And remember, my mom, unless I brought this up, she would never ever bring it up or ever talk to me. Or even when I bring it up, she, changes the subject.
Mm.
Um, I said, "Hey, mom, I called the driver because she knew I was writing this book. I called the driver of the car, and and she said, did you tell him that I hate him?" So I did not tell him that, but
Oh.
also that gives you a sense of 38 years later where my mother's pain sat. and also, yeah, that there was a lot of unresolved emotion in all of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the grief element, it's devastating. It would be so, so devastating. I think you're so brave to have phoned the driver. I don't know, because when you first started talking about it, I was thinking about purpose and I was thinking about why did Jay live if he was going to die so young? But maybe
Right.
it was all about the green card. Maybe it's about your mother's journey. Maybe it's about your journey. Maybe it's about all of them. We actually don't know, won't know. And I think in some way, we don't need to know. It just needs to be what it is. Pretty horrific though. Yeah. So I was just thinking the poor driver. Imagine if they hadn't bought a green card, they'd chosen the red one or the yellow one. Yeah.
That day or something, right? Yeah, no, it was
Yeah.
a great car.
I know the smallest things in our life can become the biggest, and we've got no idea. Little decisions we make, we've got no idea how they impact our life. And yeah, imagine if that person ordering the cars, I don't know, there could be so many reasons why it wasn't a green car when they got it, or why they were driving a green car. Maybe it wasn't even their car, who knows? But just all of these little things, I think nothing is a coincidence.
And let's unpack a little bit this thing about like we don't really need to know, like, and as someone who's had a near death experience, like I feel a mission to help people know, because there's so much suffering around death, around not paying attention to death, around, or like what's going on in Texas right now, so many
Mm,
people lost, right? And opening, for me at least, going from suffering, blame, hatred, just being closed minded about what is this universe and what are we doing here, to being much more like, oh wow, there's a continuity of consciousness, and we there's purpose in a life even if it ends early, and we all matter no matter what. Like I've opened up to all of those things, not being afraid of death, being like, oh, this life is just one life out of many, who knows what we call them in these other
mm,
dimensions and timelines and all of that. But it isn't just about what's going on here now, and all the worldviews that we have. We live in a much more complex and interesting and beautiful existence. So, and I feel like people who've had near death experiences really understand that at a much deeper level. And there's a peace and that comes with that, moment to moment, day to day, that really can help people through um, the difficulties of life.
mm, mm. Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot in it. How do you feel about death and the afterlife, having it such a big experience as a younger person?
Well, I have historically been terrified of death and feeling like I'm going to die at any minute, and had a lot of fear and obsession about death, and feeling like I was responsible, one of the many people who felt responsible for Jay's death. But since working with the book and writing it and talking to people and interviewing people, especially with near death experiences, because that's one of my hobbies, it's just like bathing in the deepest truths, and often there's such beauty and love and expansiveness and a sensation of oneness with the cosmos, right? And it's just like, oh wow, I touch into that in my living, and so wow, yes, I like that. So now, I mean, I don't want to die, but and I don't want to communicate that it's cool to die either, right? But
Yeah,
also
yeah.
that's been a little confusing, right? But yeah, I'm no longer having the same relationship to death that I used to have.
I think that's really great. I love how you're opening up the conversation, how you're, yeah, playing a part towards it being more talked about, because I think when we talk about death, a lot of the fear, not that it dissolves or it goes away, but it's just, it sort of changes the way that we perceive death. And I say this so often, the truth is none of us are getting out of here alive. So Why aren't we talking about it? Why aren't we addressing it?
right? One of the
Interesting.
most interesting things that's going on
Yeah,
are
exactly.
our death, our limited lives, what happens after what happened before, and how that influences every moment of every day. I love the subject.
Yeah, me too. I find people go, "Oh, do you think it's negative?" And I'm like, I actually find it really uplifting and really positive because I think when we talk about death, we can talk about how to truly live
Yeah.
and making this physical experience so much richer and so much more fun. Yeah, yeah, I think we've got to have fun. We can take this life way too seriously, and I'm guilty of that. But I'm trying to lighten the load, and I'm really enjoying my physical experience. I know a lot of people don't, but I think it's, I don't know, there's good stuff that can come out of it.
It
Do
is such
you?
a gift to be alive.
Yes, yes, I agree with that. We've got to truly be alive. Yep. So many die before they die.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
that's a
you're
whole nother topic. We won't go there just
yes.
now. Have you ever felt like Jay was around you? Have you felt his presence or anything since his death?
Very little, but a few times there's like when I was deep in trying to craft the book and shape it, there was a moment where I felt his shimmering presence and or seeing him in the distance or something like that. But I think more because I haven't had a lot of contact with him personally, but I think the curiosity and the journey has given me the capacity to, when someone dies now, I'll often have a visitation from them. And so just being open to what can happen, I think, is what Jay gave me the gift of him. But for me and him, not so much. But since then, like even when my mom died in 2020, um, when she died, I kept her home in her bed and for 24 hours and I bathed her and I could experience, I could sense the transition out of her body and the feeling of our deep bond, even though
Mm.
in life we were very oil and water, we did not get along. But in that experience, so relating to one soul, let's call it, I feel like he's given me that gift of being in a much deeper place with other human beings, which I'm really appreciative of.
Mm. That's quite beautiful what you're saying. Yeah, when it comes to soul, you use the term oil and water. I hear of this quite a lot in those last weeks, days, people can really connect. It's a different level to how we live in this physical state.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot. How do you feel your experience with Jay? Like, what has this taught you? Have you wondered why this has happened, or what is the bigger thing behind all of this?
Um, well, it's impossible to know, but it's certainly given me a North Star in life of what is the bigger picture of life. And I feel like we live in a very intense time of where people feel like life is meaningless, it doesn't matter, we don't matter. But I'm very clear in my body that all of us matter to the whole cosmos, to the whole space-time continuum, and this whole idea of the continuity of consciousness, however we manifest. I don't really call it reincarnation, but I very much feel the energy within each of us is part of the story of um, reality. And the more we are loving and kind and contributing to the whole, the more the universe responds. So for me, it's a huge lesson constantly, and also in forgiveness and in being open minded about all sorts of things and not wanting to just assign blame, um,
Mm,
but but rather finding the deeper meaning below anything and everything, stuff like that.
mm. Mm.
My obsession with near-death experiences and listening to people came out of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, and I hear that quite a bit. People go through an experience and then that just triggers opening up. And the topic of death is so, so big. It's not just the moment, it's not just the bedside experience. There's so much in it, and it's actually a really beautiful topic. I'm not underestimating grief. I'm not underestimating the pain that comes with it. I'm still kind of hung up on your mum. I'm really just feeling for her. You said that she passed away in 2020. Do you think she'd come to any resolve around? I mean, to lose a child, just it's tough stuff.
Very tough stuff, yeah. And no, I don't, sadly. And as as she was transitioning, so she died on a Monday morning, and this was Sunday morning. And I had she did not want to die, and she just was not facing her death, even though she was in hospice. She couldn't breathe, she had COPD, and she started taking a lot of morphine, and she still wasn't dying, she was not dying. But I on Saturday I invited her sisters over, and it was just an ordinary day. We just had lunch, we played some cards, and it was just ordinary. But on Sunday morning she said, stop telling people I'm dying, that's your thing. Those were her very last words
Oh,
to me.
wow.
Like, we don't talk about death to
Mm,
anyone. And
mm.
so, sadly, no. But at the same time, at the soul level, I feel very complete with my mother, and I feel very much love with my mother. And so I do feel like stuff happened at that level for our lifetimes. But for her, in relationship to Jay, yeah, and some of the other people that I talked to that aren't actually included in the book, like one of her ex-boyfriends, he said she just never would talk about it. So if if you never explore it in some way or another with another human being, like, how do you process all of that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really valid point. I know
And
for some people it's just too hard, and I can understand that. So, yeah, I mean, if anyone's listening, they're thinking, I just can't face this topic. That's okay. I mean, even just listening to things, being open to it, I think will really help. But we're either ready or we're not. I think a lot of suffering is what we were talking about earlier of we're here to learn lessons and to go through some level of experience. Suffering brings teaching. And that's where I wondered about the driver of the green car is Jay was okay with dying. He was completely fine with all of this happening. Maybe it was about the guy in the green car learning the experience and his suffering. You mentioned his daughter had died. Was that after Jay or was that
yeah, after,
before?
much
After.
later, like, I think 25 years later. But the
Oh,
fact that he had that right on his tongue, that no one had reached out to him for all those years.
yeah.
And I said my name, and he instantly said an eye for an eye.
Oh my goodness. See that's really got me actually. Imagine, I mean, we're talking about suffering. That's a huge amount. I hope he's okay.
Hope he's okay too.
I know. I know. I really, I can go off on a tangent just really worrying about some of the people and the stories that I hear. And I go, I
I
don't even
bet.
know them. I don't know. I'm not connected in any way, but my heart just kind of breaks for him right now. Yeah. And if only he'd bought a yellow car. Oh, we don't know. We don't
He wouldn't
know.
have been the guy that had that experience. Well, can you imagine, you black out for 1 minute
I know.
and you've killed somebody?
Oh, I don't know how you carry on, but I mean, maybe that's his life lesson. We will never actually understand a lot of this. We talk as if we do, but we don't know. So, yeah. Oh, I still feel for him regardless. I greatly appreciate you coming on, sharing your story. I'm going to think about the driver for a bit. I'm going to think about your mum for a bit. I'm going to think about Jay for a bit and everybody else who's been involved in this journey. You're involved in this journey. It continues for you. So thank you for sharing. Kristina, Amelong, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.